Hey Freedom Lovers, this is Dr. Peterson Pierre with America's Frontline Doctors bringing you today's Daily Dose. The JP Morgan Annual Healthcare Conference, a private invitation-only event described by JP Morgan as, quote, the industry's biggest gathering, end quote. Immense influence on the pharmaceutical sector as it caters to large investors. At last year's event, they enthusiastically endorsed the profitability of two new types of drugs, GLP-1 drugs including Trulicity, Wegovy, Mounjaro, Byetta, and Ozempic. The second category was Alzheimer's drugs. The keynote speaker at the conference was Dr. Robert Califf, FDA Commissioner. Califf has long been an incredibly controversial FDA commissioner due to his immense pharmaceutical conflicts of interest. He honestly should not have that job if he has conflicts of interest, but that's another story. So the head of the FDA was a keynote speaker to investors about the incredibly lucrative opportunity they could expect from these new drugs, implying that the FDA would do everything it could to push them through. Kim Witzak, a pharmaceutical safety advocate, had this to say, quote, interesting to also note, Califf was the keynote speaker on opening day, and out of the blue, the FDA granted accelerated approval to the second controversial Biogen Alzheimer drug 3 days before the conference, without an advisory committee. How great to be able to announce to the healthcare biotech industry that one of their new drugs was just granted accelerated approval, end quote. Of note, an even more controversial approval had preceded this, where the FDA overrode its own panel to approve an expensive, dangerous, and ineffective Alzheimer's drug, which resulted in 3 of the experts on the panel resigning, with one stating it was, quote, probably the worst drug approval decision in recent US history, end quote. So here's a question. If you have a panel and you're going to override the panel to push through your agenda anyway, why have a panel at all? This is just a game that the FDA is playing, and unfortunately, it's a dangerous game because all of us consumers who take drugs are the ones who will pay the price. Shortly afterward, the FDA gave a glowing press release on their approval of the drug, but due to how unsafe and ineffective the drug was, even with the FDA's endorsement, rather than become the next blockbuster drug, it objectively failed in the market and is now being discontinued by the manufacturer. You see how this game is being played? Through aggressive marketing, the staggering corruption of the FDA facilitated Ozempic's rise throughout America. Sadly, the campaign has been so successful that there's now a shortage of Ozempic. The push to expand Ozempic's market has targeted various demographics, including African Americans, children, and the elderly. I'm sorry, what happened to just going outside and playing and riding your bike or skateboarding or whatever? Get some physical activity in, spend less time in front of your device. Kids would not have this problem. There were very few kids when I was growing up who were obese, but now we've got 66% of the entire American population is overweight. Come on. We can do better. We don't need drugs. History does have a tendency to repeat itself because we forget the lessons from the past. The current rush for Ozempic is strikingly similar to the fen-phen disaster of the 90s. Sure, fen-phen worked, but it wasn't long before the drug was linked to severe heart valve damage and pulmonary hypertension, leading to its removal from the market and billions of dollars in legal settlements. By the way, those side effects were permanent. Remarkably, once the dust had settled, the FDA official who pushed fen-phen onto the market admitted, oh, this is going to blow your mind, admitted it never occurred to him to verify the drug combination was indeed safe. Please let that statement sink in for a minute. It didn't occur to him. Man, that's your job. What's particularly alarming is that many of the issues we see today with Ozempic, aggressive marketing, off-label uses, and a focus on profit over patient safety, mirror the mistakes made with fen-phen. Back then, the FDA eventually stepped in to ban the drug after realizing the extent of the harm it caused. But this time around, nah, different tactic. The FDA instead is working with the industry to push these drugs. Initially used for diabetes, Ozempic doses for weight loss can be 5 times higher and lead to many side effects and complications, including an anorexic appearance. I've seen that in some of my patients because patients are literally starving themselves. If you're going to starve yourself, you don't need a drug for that. Weight gain when stopping the drug, of course, Big Pharma loves that because you become a patient for life. Slow digestion, 3.5 times greater risk of intestinal obstruction, 9 times greater risk of pancreatitis, 3.67 times greater risk of gastroparesis, 1.5 times greater risk of gallstones, vision loss, thyroid cancer, 45% increased risk of suicidal ideation. Ooh, yeah, they don't mention that in the commercials. Obesity is largely a result of poor lifestyle choices. We know this. But as I mentioned earlier, 66% of Americans are overweight, and we love a quick fix. So the market is ripe for such drugs, and Big Pharma is more than happy to provide them. But you have to ask yourself, at what cost? Ladies and gentlemen, only the truth will set you free. Stay tuned for the next Daily Dose.